gram-negative, rod-shaped bacteria, named after Dr. Escherichia, who discovered it in feces, thus concluding that it colonizes the colon. Alright, now E. coli is gram-negative because its cell wall has a thin peptidoglycan layer, so it cannot retain the crystal violet stain. But instead, it stains pink with safranin dye used during gram staining. So it looks like a little pink rod under the microscope. Also, E. coli is a catalase-positive bacteria, and that means it produces an enzyme called catalase. This can be tested by adding a few drops of hydrogen peroxide to a colony of bacteria. And catalase makes hydrogen peroxide dissociate into water and oxygen, making the mixture foam. E. coli is also a lactose fermenter, because it can produce an enzyme called beta-galactosidase that cleaves lactose into glucose and galactose monomers. To test this, E. coli can be cultivated on lactose-containing media, such as phenol lactose. And as it ferments it, the fermentation results in the production of acids that turn the red of phenol to yellow. It is also a facultative anaerobe, meaning it lives in environments with or without oxygen. Now, taking a closer look to this bacteria, E. coli is encapsulated, meaning it's covered by a polysaccharide layer called a capsule. E. coli is a motile bacteria because it has helical whip-like threads called flagella that it can use to move around. When E. coli is cultivated on eosin methylene blue agar, it grows into black colonies with a greenish-black metallic sheen. Alright, most of E. coli are harmless, and they can peacefully colonize the human gut without causing any trouble. However, some strains of E. coli are pathogenic, meaning they can cause illness. It starts with this bacteria using little thread-like extensions called fimbriae to attach to the host cell surface. E. coli has many different strains that can do that, and they cause different diseases. These strains can be classified by two systems. The first system uses serotypes, and it groups E. coli strains based on their antigens. Antigens are elements that the host's immunity considers foreign and mount an immune reaction as a response. So, bacteria with a given serotype trigger a similar immune response. Alright, E. coli has a number of antigens, and among them we have somatic antigens located just on the cell membrane, and these ones are abridged with the letter O. There are also capsular K antigens located on the capsule, fimbrial F antigens located on the fimbria, and flagellar H antigens located on the bacterial flagella. Usually, after this letter that tells on what part of the bacteria where the antigen is found, it follows a designation number in case there are more antigens of the same kind, such as K1, K2, and so forth. E. coli antigens influence its power to cause diseases, so that's why they can alternatively be referred to as virulence factors. For example, E. coli with capsular antigen 1, or K1, are the ones that cause neonatal meningitis, while an E. coli that has an O157 and an H7 designated as O157H7 is associated with hemorrhagic colitis, hemolytic uremic syndrome, and diarrheal outbreaks. Other E. coli serotypes include E. coli SE15, E. coli F11, E. coli O25H, and so on. But in fact, these serotypes are so numerous and they can go up to 200 serotypes. Thankfully, there's a much simpler classification, and that is based on pathotypes. A pathotype is a group of organisms of the same species that cause disease in the same way, meaning they use the same virulence factors. And there are 5 E. coli pathotypes: Shiga-like toxin-producing E. coli, or STEC for short, enterotoxigenic E. coli, or ETEC, enteroinvasive E. coli, or EIEC, enteropathogenic E. coli, or EPEC, and uropathogenic E. coli, or UPEC. So first, Shiga-like toxin-producing E. coli, or STEC, is called that because it makes a toxin similar to the one called Shiga toxin produced by Shigella. STEC attaches to the host's intestinal cells and then start releasing toxins that cause injury to intestinal epithelium and underlying blood vessels, resulting in inflammation. This makes fluid and blood leak into the intestinal lumen, resulting in bloody diarrhea. That's why some people refer to it as enterohemorrhagic E. coli, or EHEC. But STECs can also affect the urinary tract, causing hemolytic uremic syndrome, or HUS. Hemolytic uremic syndrome usually develops after STEC have released their toxin into the bloodstream. From the bloodstream, the toxin can get into the kidneys and bind to the endothelial cells lining the glomerulus, making them die by apoptosis, or programmed cell death. Consequently, a dead endothelial cell leaves a gap in the capillary wall, and as more gaps keep forming, it results in holes big enough to allow large molecules, such as proteins, to start leaking out of the capillaries, resulting in proteinuria. The destruction of endothelial cells triggers an inflammatory process in which inflammatory molecules, such as cytokines and chemokines, are released. Cytokines and chemokines activate blood platelets and initiate the clot formation. As these platelets are used to form these clots, their number in the blood decreases, resulting in low platelets or thrombocytopenia. Also, these clots can be big enough to obstruct small arterioles. So as red blood cells force to pass through obstructed microvessels, they can get sliced into fragments called schistocytes in this process known as microangiopathic hemolysis. So as more red blood cells get destroyed in the process, their number reduces, which can cause anemia. Alternatively, if clots obstruct too many arterioles, organs that depend on high blood flow like the kidney may lack blood and die by ischemia. Now, an ischemic kidney is unable to filter blood. This is how too much of metabolic wastes, such as urea, start accumulating in the blood, leading to uremia. Then, HUS is a combination of hemolytic anemia, when red blood cells are being overly destroyed, kidney failure due to the destroyed glomerular cells that result in uremia or high levels of blood urea, and thrombocytopenia, meaning low platelets. Okay, next up there's enterotoxigenic E. coli, or ETEC. After using its fimbriae to attach to the intestinal mucosa, it starts releasing two types of enterotoxins: heat-labile enterotoxin, which is easily destroyed by heat, and heat-stable enterotoxin, which is not easily destroyed by heat. Both of these toxins cause intestinal inflammation, which leads to a lot of fluid being secreted in the intestinal lumen, causing watery diarrhea. But there's usually no intestinal wall destruction, and as a result, no bleeding. In contrast, enteroinvasive E. coli, or EIEC, attaches to the intestinal epithelium, and then it mechanically destroys and invades the intestinal epithelial cells and multiplies intracellularly. This triggers a widespread destructive inflammatory response in the intestines that may result in bloody diarrhea. Next up, there's enteropathogenic E. coli, or EPEC. And for unknown reasons, this one almost exclusively causes disease in children under 2 years of age. EPEC also attaches to the intestinal epithelium and invades the intestinal epithelial cells. Then, through an unknown mechanism, it destroys the cell cytoskeleton, which is the intracellular framework responsible for maintaining the shape of the cell. This makes the intestinal epithelial cells flatten, which impairs their ability to absorb water and nutrients, resulting in watery diarrhea. And lastly, there's uropathogenic E. coli, or UPEC, that causes about 90% of all community-acquired urinary tract infections, or UTIs, and roughly 50% of hospital-acquired UTIs. UPEC usually live peacefully in the gastrointestinal tract without causing any harm. However, if they get out of the colon, like following defecation, and colonize the perineum, they may ascend from the perineum and up the urethra and reach the urinary bladder, causing cystitis. On the urinary epithelium, these bacteria produce alpha and beta hemolysins, which cause lysis of urinary tract cells. They can also move up the ureters and infect the kidneys, causing pyelonephritis. Symptoms depend on the disease and the infecting pathotype. So right off the bat, all pathotypes except for UPEC cause diarrhea and are associated with abdominal cramps and vomiting. With STEC, there's bloody diarrhea, and there may be a low-grade fever. If things progress to hemolytic uremic syndrome, there may be body swelling, confusion, nausea, and vomiting. In addition to that, there can be paleness of the eyes conjunctiva due to anemia, jaundice that results from buildup of bilirubin that result from hemolysis, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. With EIEC, there may also be bloody diarrhea and chills. With the remaining pathotypes, EPEC and ETEC, there's usually non-bloody diarrhea. EPEC causes severe dehydration in children under 2 and may cause prolonged or chronic diarrhea, which may lead to malnutrition or stunted growth. ETEC causes large amounts of watery diarrhea, and there may also be fever and bloating. Finally, UPEC causes UTI symptoms like dysuria, which is pain during urination, urinary frequency, and if the kidney is affected, there may be flank pain. Now in general, it's hard to diagnose an E. coli serotype or pathotype because it requires a series of complex tests. But to diagnose E. coli in general, gram staining can be done on a stool or urine sample, and cultures on eosin methylene blue agar can be done to confirm the diagnosis. HUS can be confirmed by identifying Shiga toxin in the blood. Treatment for diarrhea usually consists of hydration and rest. Antibiotics are not routinely used, but doxycycline or cotrimoxazole, which is the combination of trimethoprim and sulfamethoxazole, can be given in severe cases. For hemolytic uremic syndrome, supportive care includes dialysis, corticosteroids, blood transfusions, and plasmapheresis, or the exchange of the affected blood plasma with a new unaffected one from a donor. UTIs are treated with antibiotics such as cotrimoxazole, nitrofurantoin, or fluoroquinolones like ciprofloxacin. Alright, as a quick recap, Escherichia coli are gram-negative, rod-shaped, encapsulated, facultative anaerobic, catalase-positive, lactose-fermenting bacteria. Even though some E. coli might become pathogenic, most of the time they colonize the gut harmlessly. The pathogenic E. coli are classified into 4 main pathotypes, namely STEC, which particularly causes hemorrhagic diarrhea and hemolytic uremic syndrome, ETEC, which is commonly associated with watery diarrhea, EIEC, which causes bloody diarrhea by mechanically damaging the intestinal epithelium, EPEC, which causes diarrhea in children below 2 years, and finally, UPEC, which causes most of the UTIs. E. coli is usually diagnosed using a gram stain and a microscopic examination, followed by a bacteria culture. Treatment of diarrhea consists of supportive measures like rehydration, and sometimes antibiotics are used. Hemolytic uremic syndrome may require complex treatment measures like dialysis, corticosteroids, blood transfusions, and plasmapheresis. UTIs are treated with antibiotics such as cotrimoxazole, nitrofurantoin, or fluoroquinolones like ciprofloxacin.